Great. So welcome for those who are here today. I'm really excited to have you on this talk. My name is Albert, for those who don't know me, Albert, and this is my partner Sean, on whichever side he is. So very excited because this is our first LinkedIn live session. I don't know if it's really LinkedIn lives technically, but point is we're in a sense announcing our collab in terms of Be Fully Human. And we're going to give you a walkthrough on a specific topic just to start sharing a little bit about our vision and our mission and what we're doing. So before we go, I'm going to hand over to Sean to just introduce himself, and then we'll kick off.
Hey everyone, Sean here. I am the Human Performance Specialist at Be Fully Human, and I come from many fields of study. I've studied somatic coaching. I was an exercise scientist. I was a sub-elite athlete myself. And yes, I met my stress response very early on in my 20s in the industry or the Institute of Sport. I learned a way of understanding how stress impacts the body in a cumulative sense. And the industry of sport or athletic performance tells us that when something's wrong or we need to fix something, we just do more of the same thing and hopefully get a different outcome. And it's more. And eventually that led me to a very big burnout in my early 20s. And I started trying to figure out what was going wrong because it really didn't say what it did on the box, and there wasn't too much health in the performance world. So I was very confused at that time in my life and had to study further. And yeah, I didn't really know what that industry was teaching me about how to be human and what it is to live a life from the inside out.
Cool. Yeah. So my name is Albert Villian, and I started my career journey in medicine. And so where Sean comes from more from the performance side, I was looking at the pathology side. But also similar challenge, worked as a doctor and felt like something doesn't add up because I'm seeing a lot of ill health, people coming for symptom relief, but the diseases that are plaguing our society tend to be lifestyle driven, tends to be around choices and around emotions. And it's as if the more we develop cures, the more the diseases seem to catch up. And so through my own journey, I felt like the institutions of health didn't really match up either to what it says on the tin, and had to go on my own journey, and eventually ended up going through some counseling myself, working through a health tech company. I've got one of my previous colleagues on the call, and then switching into coaching and consulting. And then through Sean and our individual journeys, we kind of came together, partners in crime and partners in life. And our final kind of product that we're putting on the table at the moment is the Be Fully Human program. Excuse me. Which is really a cumulative work of the individual work we've done in ourselves as people, the discoveries we've made about what it means to be human, and then the work that we've seen in our clients. Because when you think about it, it's kind of weird that somehow we're missing a beat as human beings. We're taught how to do a lot of things, except for the one thing that kind of defines us, which is to be a human being, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and following on from what you said there, it's really about that internal felt sense rather than always the conceptual understanding of things, which we'll explain a little bit more later on in the talk. But really the systems that we do have today, like going to school, learning math, science, geography, all of those things are conceptual entities, and they really don't teach us how we are as humans, how we relate, how we understand our bodies. What do we feel when we feel stressed, or what is stress like in the body and what does it push us to do? So really we're looking at this whole process from the inside out and not applying something externally to the body, to the mind. We're really looking at the physical, mental, and almost performative aspects of how we show up in the workplace, how we show up in relating, and how do we do this thing. There's no real manual or guidebook for being human. So this is what we're about, and this is what we're going to keep bringing ourselves back to, is how we are being human in all of these places within ourselves, but also within our lives.
Exactly. So last little spiel about the context and the container. So that's the philosophy, that's the drive. It's how to be a human being. And we do this specifically through development programs, through consulting businesses, integrating a lot of different fields, psychology, technology, behavioral science, medicine, really bringing our understanding together. And most of all, I would say our life experiences personally, but also the life experiences we see with our clients. And the kind of, to be honest, we've started really rolling out the more comprehensive program. The surprising results we get when we just work in harmony with how our organism functions, how a human actually works. So that's the container, that's the big container, but we'd like to focus today's discussion on a specific topic within that. So that's just for you to have a sense of where we're coming from philosophically. But today I want to look specifically at stress and hacks, because it's trendy, right? People talk about stress a lot. We talk about kind of how to hack your nervous system, how to hack this, how to hack that. We've got this really high-paced, button-driven culture that we're all part of. And so just the breakdown of the talk, we're going to cover a little bit stress, what it means, and how we want to redefine it. Then we talk a little bit about hacks, what hacks are and why they fail. Then I want to move into technology as an ally, because it's easy for us, especially these days, to see technology as a threat or a challenge for us, which is a challenge, but how do we potentially turn the table? And then lastly, bringing it all together into integration rather than interventions. We're in a society that's very pathology driven, really about, how to give you a solution. But how about we just get the symphony to play as it was meant to play? That's really the dream.
Yeah, all the layers to being human. And before we go on, I'm always going to be reminding us through this call about bringing you back to your human experience, or what you're feeling right now as being a human. And before we go on, it's really a call to help you or invite you to participate in this call. So anything you want to say in the chat box, please put it in. Thoughts, feelings, emotions as we're talking or sharing a practice, not to just consume. And we also don't want to just lecture at you, which is what usually happens at a conceptual level. We want to be in a shared experience with you, and so that it becomes embodied and not conceptualized. So through all of these experiments today and all of the insights you are going to get from the practices we go through today, just share them in so it becomes a more collective human experience. So with that, let's start with a practice. And if you're sitting or standing or lying down or whatever surface you're connecting to, take a moment to notice your feet. And just noticing how it is to connect to your feet. And we'll go one layer deeper. And as you're connecting to your feet, notice what happens within you. What do you notice? What do you experience as I'm doing the practice? So we're not just focusing on our feet, we're focusing on the effect of the practice. So yeah, noticing your feet, and then notice the experience of noticing your feet.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
What happened for you, Albert?
Well, firstly, I realize how disconnected I am from my feet, which tends to happen when I'm in these presenting modes. I'm noticing I'm slowing down, enjoying the silence. It's almost like my perspective shifted and opened up a little bit. And I almost want to stay here, not go any further into the talk. I'm enjoying the bit of a slower pace. Yeah, so that's interesting. And it might be different, I guess, for everyone. It's just the invitation to experience and notice and bring back to what comes from within.
Yeah. And maybe if before we go on, maybe just everyone share what they felt in the chat box. What was the experience like for you? Just a couple of words.
And I might also give an interesting, and you don't have to frame it that way, but sometimes we can notice a way that something happens in our thoughts. So we might be judging, or we might be thinking about it, something happening in our emotions or something happening in our body. Those 3 checkpoints. Yeah, focus in a different way. Yeah, nice one, Yana. Breathing. It's often one that happens, our breathing.
Whole body. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and maybe it's an important reminder before I go on to the next slide with what we're going to talk about in terms of stress itself, is that during this talk today, we're not saying we're replacing any of the other coaching modalities, mental health strategy, any rituals you're doing already that are supporting you. What we're aiming to do is reframe something, whatever that might be for you, whatever you get from the talk today, but also know that it's adding to your toolbox. You may even do a similar breath practice. You might find a different way to do it that enhances your breath practice. And that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to optimize things in some way, but also look at the integration again, just like we did with 2 different layers of meeting our feet and noticing the experience we feel inside the body as we do that. Yeah. Great.
Cool. Let's dive in.
Stress. Okay, so stress is usually labeled as bad, and it's labeled, it gets a bad rap in the press, in media, and you sometimes get a lot of media marketing about you can live a life without stress. But stress actually is part of the human experience. Yes, at toxic levels and repeated, if you're in a stressful situation, it can be detrimental to your health. But actually, stress is a very important piece to the puzzle of how we exist and live in the world. Stress can be used as an energy. It's a survival energy. We really look at it as an energy system that drives us to action. So believe it or not, that your stress system is the thing that wakes you up in the morning. It allows you to get through modern living. And
just on that, quite interesting this morning, I noticed when I woke up, because I'm paying a bit more attention to my breath. This morning, as I was waking up, and I'm a slow riser, I'm a sloth. And I just brought my attention to my breath, and I suddenly realized how my body started speeding up my breath. And I think what we also sometimes miss is we think of stress as the negative experience of pressure, but it's even those subtle shifts when my energy starts rising and my body starts preparing for action. So even just noticing that subtle shift.
Like even now, you and I have a certain level of stress in our systems to perform on this talk for everyone else. Otherwise, if the stress was too low, we might be putting you to sleep. So part of that ancient system, we call it that it brings a little bit of an issue where there's a mismatch in the ancient system allows us to run from the saber-toothed tiger. It gives us that energy for survival, but it might be mismatched in a context where we are, depending on where we live, depending on who we are, we might be living in safe environments, but the stress response is, let's say, ignited with many other modern day living experiences, like a full inbox or a deadline that's looming. But really, there is a power there that we can change our mindset and shift how we are with stress, and then are able to deal with the amount of stress. So it's a simple shift in perspective or mindset that can actually harness our stress response and give us the energy we need. There was a study done at, I think it was Rochester University, and they were looking at studying anxiety levels before exam time for students. And the usual tactic that we have in modern day times is like that marketing technique. You can live without stress, but really they say the usual tactic is to say, stay calm. It'll be okay. Don't worry about it. All right. So let's just push all of that stress down and not harness the value of it. But what they did was they really helped students understand that, hey, this is your brain and body rising to the challenge. Anxiety can actually be your friend. You might need this energy to perform this task. And reframing stress in this way allowed the students to have a more positive spin on understanding how this physiological mechanism could leverage their performance and focus. And this has worked across the board through performers, athletes. They all in some way shift their mindset and perceive it differently. There's a system in the body that we, yes, as humans in our brains can perceive something to be very stressful, but actually part of the system as well sees something as a real existing threat. So no saber-toothed tiger. Okay, if you look around now, there's nothing around us. So there's actual danger, but the perceived thing for humans is where we mostly get tripped up, and that's where the mind shift state will come in.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to look that up, there's a positive stress effect, I think, that you can look up as a thing to start working with. That'll help you have a better relationship with the layers of stress that you're dealing with, so you can perform better.
Yeah, and just to speak to the questions you raised, Jana, as well. The interesting thing with stress and anxiety, we've got a lot of different words in our modern vocabulary for emotional experiences. And that's useful because I think it helps us articulate meaning. But sometimes the words can also create a lot of confusion and differentiation and judgment, right? Because stress has kind of become layered. So I like to think about any emotional energy, and how I tend to work with clients is rather just looking at it as an energetic state. You can have the definition as one way to define it, but the other part is the experience a rising, kind of mobilizing experience, or is it going down and kind of slowing down and relaxing experience? Then it can be maybe stress, it can be maybe anxiety, you might call it even anger, you might call it fear. There'll be subtle differences, but the question is, there's the energy, and then there's the meaning that we're putting on it, and the experience we're having with it. And often the experience and the meaning bit is where we have a little bit more leverage once we can tune into what is this energy actually that's happening in my organism. And it's a similar thing, Emma, around stress. From my point of view, just physiologically, stress is actually the mobilization of your body to meet whatever demand it is. Now, that can be a negative experience because it's the demands from your boss that you don't like and the work that you don't like, or it can be a positive experience because you're trying to win a race. And so the physiology is the same, but the narrative might be slightly different. And that's where we have a little bit more room. And we'll get into the model as well. But essentially what we're trying to do is to say, there's the meaning, the conceptual part, there's the emotion, which is the experience, the relationship with it. And then there's the physiology, the body. What is the body actually doing? What is the sensory experience of whatever the label is that I'm with?
Sometimes the thought pattern of it is actually more challenging to us than the actual amount of stress we physiologically are dealing with at the time. Yeah.
And so the main message for us is just to, can we deconstruct stress a little bit? Can we hold it a little bit more curiously and take some of the baggage of society out of it? And then how do we work with that energy? Whether the energy is stress, whether it's high, whether it's low, whether it's mobilizing, or whether it's challenging. What do I do with that energy, and how do I support myself? That's kind of the main landing point around stress. And then when it gets to hacks, and the reason why we wanted to address this is when I work with clients, it's in the coaching capacity. Often, people come to me because they have a pain, a challenge. There's something that's wrong. I feel, lack of confidence. I feel overwhelmed. I don't have work-life balance, whatever it is. Or they have a desire at a very basic level. There's a pain that I want to get away from, or there's a desire I want to move towards. I want to have a better career, more work-life balance, see my kids more, be happier. And because of our society, we have these little, shortcuts to get those needs met. We are not used to the way that the organism naturally works, which isn't actually shortcuts. It is more integrated. And so what tends to happen is we tend to address things in a symptom level, instead of looking at it more from a demand, more from a big picture level. So notice when there's something that you think is the problem. And the question that I'd often ask is this really the problem, or is it the symptom of something else? And more often than not, it is the symptom of a lot of other complex things. We're not a computer. There's unfortunately not one. If there was one button, I would be using it a lot more than I am. But we are a complex system. And the human mind, because the human mind really needs to conserve energy, likes to have simple answers. The challenge is we will sometimes then oversimplify, and we'll miss a very important part of the process. That's also why we then end up doing interventions. I have two clients on the same Be Fully Human program. And the one client shows up for the sessions, takes some of the homework, does a little bit of the work, tries to almost have a solution for that week, one thing that they want to do, and that helps them. It kind of moves the dial. The other client committed to a daily practice. They were having a lot of stress at work, And so we developed a practice they're doing even when it's going well. And trust me, no one wants to do those practices when you're doing well. You're like, oh my God, it's such an effort.
Mm.
But he committed to the practice. And because he committed to the practice, his nervous system was able to start incorporating a new baseline. And it's fascinating. The results, I mean, in some ways, I'm like, the results is obvious, but he came back after, I think, 2 months, and he showed up. He says, I think I've had my worst 2 weeks in 3 years of work, but I haven't completely lost my cool in the way that I usually do. But he sounded like, he's like, but I don't know, maybe it wasn't as bad as I think it was. He even doubted, why am I feeling okay under this amount of pressure? Because his nervous system, usually he would completely catastrophize. He would shut down. He wouldn't be able to socialize at home because the demands are too much. Now that he built that baseline, suddenly he feels okay. And he's like, I don't understand how this works. Why do I feel fine? I'm expecting to break down, essentially.
Mm.
And so when we implement it as a practice, as a nervous system regulated baseline, rather than interventions, we will see better results.
Yeah. And just on that point that you mentioned, and how different the practice or the rituals was implemented in an integrated way, is that when we practice, when we're in our, let's say, our green zone, where everything's nice and easy and breezy, we're actually then in a more receptive learning state. And we're actually, if you think of a stress bucket, there's all the stress that goes in, daily life stuff, work stuff, deadlines, all of that. But then when we work in a place where we have a little bit of less stress and more capacity, we're actually creating a bigger bucket. The bucket size increases, so your capacity increases. And just like, I think that's what you were saying, when you got into a stressful event again, or that stressful moment that used to stress him out, because he was practicing when he was in a more receptive state, the event was less of a problem for him.
Exactly. Yeah. And why we highlight this, in some ways, when I say this to myself and to clients, I think this is so basic. It's like when you think about the latest health advice, it's eat, move, sleep. It's, daily, it's good habits. It's all the stuff. It's like, oh, do we really want it? We want something to be exciting and new and life-changing. But humans haven't really changed as much as technology in our context. We're the same organismically. We're exactly the same as the people in the Middle Ages. It's hard to believe. We don't really want to believe that. We want to think we're better than those people, so much better. But if you're going to put us next to each other on a biological, psychological level, we function in very similar ways, very similar pace as well. And so the same kind of ingredients, nutrition, sleep, habits, rituals, relationships, are the ingredients that make up a good, healthy, happy human life. At the same time, though, some of the ways in which our minds and bodies work have been hijacked by the technology and by society. And so we have a bit of a bad habits that we need to unlearn. Clients don't come to me when they feel fine. They come when they feel in pain. But when they're okay, they'll actually do much better to then learn the habits they need to learn, so that when they're in a tough spot, they have the capacity. So it takes a little bit of maturity, I guess, if I think about myself, to step back and go, okay, my mind wants to just scroll on my phone, but I know that on the long term, it will help me if I just put my phone in a lockbox, if that's what it takes. And then that creates that solid baseline. The last bit on this is just to speak to the root cause and the ingredients. Another trap we often fall into is, why am I doing this thing? I have this so many times. One client would say, I tend to overeat when my wife isn't home. I just don't understand why. And then he wants to spend the entire session getting to the root cause of, where did this start? Now, it's useful sometimes to understand where things begin, but the reality is, once they've taken root, the only way to work with them is to how they are showing up right now. And to recognize it's not just one thing that drives our behavior. It tends to be quite a few different things. I don't just sleep well because I get to bed on time. I sleep well because I didn't have a stressful day. I had a bedside routine. There's the ingredients all add up and stack up. And then that gives me this good experience. It's not as exciting as the magic pill. It's not as sexy as selling a magic pill, but it is how humans work. And if that's how we work, why not just follow that design and respect that design, working in that more complex way? Cool. Anything else on this, Sean? Any questions on this slide from anyone?
No, I was going to say take a moment to practice again. So reminding everyone to feel their feet and notice when they feel their feet, what do you experience? What do you notice happens within you? And this is how we would practice or ritualize something in the moment. Albert and I are even practicing or ritualizing something in the moment. I'm feeling my hips on the floor. I'm noticing my breath. So I can stay in contact with you. I can stay regulated. And now you're doing the same practice, but you're doing it again. What's different? What did you notice this time around? Pop it in the chat box. Nice, Yana. Staying present. Makes you be in the, in the moment,
In the money.
Yeah, I want to be there too. No many. Great.
Just on this, and I know we said it earlier, and this is, you know, if there's a golden thread for us to come back to, and something I'm bringing myself back to, it is about the symphony. It's about the whole. It's about the integration rather than the bits and pieces. We're giving you bits and pieces, but give yourself an opportunity to step back and see, how does this fit into the whole picture of who I am as a human? So that's the one theme. And the other theme for me is the how rather than the what. I have many clients who try mindfulness or try yoga or try whatever, but how they do it is almost worse than what they're doing. It's like, I have to do the yoga at 5 a.m. in the morning, and then I have to do, it's like, okay, well, that doesn't sound very nourishing. Maybe don't even do yoga, but just allow yourself to meet yourself in a more relaxed, caring way. So the how is really key part of what the practices will eventually do. And that's why it's important for us to try and bake them into our day-to-day rather than have, 20 minutes dedicated to some enlightenment moment.
It's always the way. It's the approach. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm enjoying my feet on the floor now. So
yeah, I think you're getting too sleepy. Let's move on.
Cool. So let's pick up the pace, pick up the stress. First question, pop it in the chat box. Just how is technology affecting your life right now? So just give yourself an opportunity to reflect and just anything that comes up, how technology is affecting you. So not the second question yet, but just the first one. So let me get a sense check of overwhelming, distracting, useful, right? Necessary evil. So good, international business, bad, time suck, useful but sometimes distracting, overwhelming at times, makes me feel in my head and not in my environment, necessary evil. Great to work remotely, but there's so much noise. Yes. Extremely useful and practical, so distracting. Yes. So we all have a similar, there'll be similar threads we all have in terms of our relationship with technology. And that's just the nature of the world we live in. Yeah, Emma, I feel you. I actually came home last night from London, and I was also, London also drives my pace. And then I get home and I'm like, I can't actually down-regulate. And then I'm on my phone. I'm like, that's the worst thing to do before bed. But yes, we tend to have these patterns of behavior. And so the follow-up question is, again, if we zoom out, if we look at the symphony, if we look at the integration, how do we actually leverage technology to support us? And if we zoom out more in terms of our mission and kind of what Sean and I are trying to achieve, how do we do that in service of our humanity? Now I'm going to try and demo this, and demos usually fail when we're doing it live. But I'm going to just show you something that I do on ChatGPT, and you might have tried it yourself. But just to give you a glimpse in terms of how do we tilt some of our technologies that is that can do a lot of different things intentionally in service of our humanity. So I'll basically just walk it through. So I want you to act like a coach. Just ask me reflective questions, show empathy and support, do it in an iterative way. I want to work through an issue.
Absolutely. What's on your mind today that you'd like to explore or work through?
So I found myself last night getting home from London, and I was really tired, but I was also wired, and I ended up, not being able to sleep. So I got up and I sat on my phone on Instagram to kind of down-regulate. But somehow I think it's not necessarily the best approach.
It sounds like you were feeling both physically tired and mentally wired, which can be a tough combination. What do you think led you to turn to Instagram in that moment? And
oh, okay, I interrupted him. Good question. Instagram, I guess I know what to expect. So there's something like predictable about that.
it makes sense that you were drawn to something familiar and predictable, especially when feeling that wired energy. How do you think that predictability helps you in those moments?
Okay. So I won't take you through an entire coaching session, but this is a really fun and simple way for me to consciously say, okay, instead of Instagram, maybe I can have a conversation. Maybe I can think through something. Because of AI, we've got a lot more options available. And so it's important for us to think, how do I actually flip technology to serve what I need? There's a lot of meditation apps and things, but again, it's not just the thing you're doing, it's how you're doing it. Yes, exactly, Karin. Mm-hmm. So you can use ChatGPT in almost any way. You can just give it a role. And a last little tip on that, and I can share a bit more details after the call about ways you can use it, but you can also modulate how you want them to interact with you. You can say, I want you to be more supportive, more therapeutic, have a different style. So you can tweak the approach to, in a sense, help you with your humanness, which is essentially what we want to do, right? I also bought a kitchen safe. I don't know if you know a kitchen safe, but it's basically a box with a time lock. And I use it to lock my phone away for a few hours because I know sometimes I can't trust myself. So I need to actually build a restriction in. And so I'm using one technology to manage another technology, again, just to give me that little bit of space. And when I do, the experience is, oh, okay, I actually have some space. Sean, you had a story about, I think, one of your clients on your retreats with technology.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that because of the pace you were mentioning, but also when you put your phone away, it's like reprieve. And she shared in a reflection circle at the end of the retreat about she kind of zoomed out in her life and all this automation. I've got Amazon, I have food delivered to my home. We have all this technology, we have all of this other stuff just arriving at our door just by the click of a button. And she questioned, why is her life so busy? How are things speeding up? Why is there no difference in pace? And there's one clue in the nervous system that I feel is like your example of getting home from London. Your system is charged and you choose to go onto Instagram, where technology keeps our system entertained for quite a long time. So the curve just keeps going up and up and up. So we require more energy with these things. But what our nervous system really needs is that it has an undulating, oscillating effect where we actually need a downward curve. And we don't get much of that with the pace that technology works at. Just like the example we said before, the mismatch of our biological systems are still wired a very ancient way, where we had breaks between hunting and gathering and slowing down and milking the cow and coming back and having lunch, where now there's no breaks. And so our system gets neurologically wound up instead of coming down that very nice, slow recovery curve that we crave.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one. So back to the original map is, if we think about how we function as humans, the need is for this, but the context doesn't do that. I've had a few clients that said they can't switch off. I'm saying, yeah, well, maybe you're expecting yourself to switch off way too quickly. It's like trying to slow down, you know, a 50-ton truck driving at 140 miles an hour. You don't just brake. You need to down gear. So you need to allow yourself step by step slowing down. And then also the other part is if I'm used to functioning at that level, it can feel a little bit uncomfortable when I'm to slow down. And so I almost need to get used to, just like a client in the beginning, you need to get used to, this is actually fine. You know, I don't need to be like, the adrenaline doesn't need to be in my system for me to feel okay. So it's also a learning curve. Cool. So from all of this, the way we tie it together is what we like to call from hacks to harmony. And I use the word harmony especially because, you know, I've got a bit of a music background, and I think it's a better model for thinking about how we function as humans. It is really about the ecosystem, all of these pieces coming together rather than the individual hacks and interventions. So, Sean, I think this is your slide. Yes?
Yeah. So following on from that neurological windup we feel can happen on a mental, emotional, and physical level that we don't know how to come down from. And that's why we look at each system in the body. And we are a system within systems, cells within cells. So we need to understand the intricate connection between all of them and how they're relating and how they're all, excuse me, how they're all communicating. So with usual perspectives or usual hacks, is there the list that's coming?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. My AI is working. So the first layer, if I had just said, connect to your feet, I'm only drawing awareness. I'm only drawing the conceptual idea of connecting to one's feet. But I'm not relating to it in terms of how it has an impact or an effect on me, which then goes a little bit lower down. It's coming into application. So we have the awareness, the conceptual ideas of things. We're educated why breath work and connecting to our feet are important. But then it becomes a skill. Then it needs to be applied. And like we've done now, we're applying it in the moment. So these things you can take with you wherever you go. And like Albert was saying, I'm going to do yoga. I'm going to do it in such a way. It's the way we're connecting and relating to the practice. So that contextual modification is so important that if I'm scheduling breath work, I'm scheduling my meditation in with an app. That's what we'll do, but it will only stick to the awareness or educative level. And it might not drop down into other layers because we don't sit with the practice long enough, or we don't realize what impact it's having and how we're feeling about it and how things are changing within us. And then we might then from that practice take it on a walk with us. So then it becomes integrated and embedded. Or if you're even in the workplace, we look at doing the meditation or the breath work in place, like we're doing today. So if you're remembering your feet and connecting to what it's like while I'm talking, you can do that in the moment, which makes it much more richer. And then you're also connecting to other layers in your organism, that it goes through the psyche, it goes through the nervous system, it goes into the felt experience. It uses all of your senses to bring out a richness in your practice and your rituals, rather than I'm just doing this thing and it's a tick box, because then we'll be stuck in that conceptual awareness layer. And then it doesn't translate into something habitual and something that becomes part of you. And that's the embedded and embodied side that we're looking for. So it's got to go through all those layers. It's got to, if you think of the body as a rich soil, you know, those seeds have got to go in, and then they need moisture and water and the right temperature to start germinating. And it's the same thing for the human body.
Yeah. And it's in essence what we're hoping to do with the model and with our approach, and maybe hopefully something that this landed for you today is, when it comes to being a human being, it's complicated and it's complex, right? But it's good to try then and to just simplify it through a model, but a model that is comprehensive. And the model that we've then landed on is just this really simple head, heart, body model. And when we think about how we function in the modern society, the biggest gap is really on the body side. And the biggest misunderstanding is on the body side, that we think of body as something we do exercise with, 5 in the morning, and usually kind of high intensity. We don't always bring the body back into our awareness and into our practice when we're sitting in front of clients, when we're doing meetings, when we're with our kids, whatever it is. And so that's a big piece of the puzzle that we need to come back to restore, I would say, our humanity. And also because the body is really where the nervous system lives. And so the regulated nervous system, once I can regulate my nervous system, that enables me to be in maybe difficult conversations, to be vulnerable, to be open, to be receptive, and also to say no to someone because I can regulate. And that also enables me to think clearly and strategically. What tends to happen is we focus on the mind bit, but we're working with people that have, stressed emotions and bodies. And so it's like your bandwidth mentally is so narrow that you're not really giving yourself enough room to be expansive and to grow in the way that you want. So I would always recommend people always start with the body. Then when the body feels okay, go to the heart. And that's also why we brought in the feet intentionally as a practice. And then from the heart, what does the mind need? A simple practice I often encourage people, and maybe we can quickly do that now in this moment. While we're in practice mode, you can feel your feet again, and just imagine you're asking someone else, and then just ask, body, what do you need? And see what comes up. Might be a word, it might be a feeling. Just check in, body, what do you need? Listen. And you can share it in the chat if it comes up. Okay. And then when you're ready, check in with your heart and say, heart, what do you need? That's interesting. You can share it in the chat if you want. And then lastly, mind or head, what do you need? Oh, I'm not surprised by that one. Okay. It's a really simple practice. I know I took us through it quite quickly. You can maybe spend more time there, but essentially it's just a check in to go body, heart, mind, but each one ask and listen. And then sometimes you'll see alignment in the needs. Sometimes the one will need to move and the other one needs to rest. And that gives you a clue, right? That's sometimes why we are struggling, because there's different parts of us that have competing needs. And then the best response is maybe to say, how do I meet those needs potentially? And you may be able to, you may not be able to, but it's a good check-in to just bring yourself back. Cool. And then the last one, I think, Sean.
Yeah, just to add to that as well. I think to add to that is once the head knows something, once the heart feels something different, that actually creates a tension, like a physical tension. I had a client that said, wow, my chest is really tight when I hold those two. It was a visceral experience. And then talking about the stress response itself, that tension, like Gabor Mate says, he's like, tension needs your attention. So what's it saying? What can I do with this? There's always a message there. And this head, heart, body practice is a really good investigative tool for that. Really, really powerful. And even just at a simple level, to know that we need rest, to know that we need something sweet. It can also be that simple.
It is
allow that tension to relax. Yeah. Great. So how do we do this thing? How do we actually implement? And like I said before, we're not looking at changing too much today. We're here to give you a different insight, a different mindset in terms of accepting and acknowledging what stress is as a human experience. And changing that mindset can help you leverage more of your potential and that stress response. But think of your practices that you're using right now. Breath work, walks, maybe share them in the chat box so everyone can see what everybody else is doing. Journaling. Yeah, whatever you are practicing at the moment. take some time, like we did with the feet, to notice what's happening. And you can even notice what's happening in your head, in your heart, in your body. Notice what's happening in you. And what is the impact of your practice? What effect?
When you're doing the practice.
When you're doing it,
Yeah.
yes, in the moment, yeah. Because, like I said before, we're looking at not staying in the conceptual level. Oh, I did my breath work. And then I hold on to the feeling of the breath work, the texture of it. Okay, can I remain calm the rest of the day? Because when you connect to the actual breath, let's stay with the breath practice, for example, can I feel the air coming in and out of my nose? Do I feel the rise and fall of my chest? That's the first layer of noticing. And then when I notice those things, does that make me feel calm? Are there any emotions? Any thoughts, images? So we're deepening. We're going through a different layer of the psyche. The nervous system and the sensory system now is sensing something different. We're hitting more physiological systems. Yeah. So the richness, really get into the richness of the practice. And that's what you're noticing in the moment as you're practicing. Great. And it's important, like we said as well, those oscillating curves. There's not much downward curve for us in this modern world. So take a moment to practice noticing the change. So pausing after your practice. Really, your nervous system and your body then it literally digests the experience. From having a certain amount of chemistry and hormones in the body, and that change gives us a different feeling and experience, we then are allowed to digest it. So take a moment to notice the change. So try, if you can, not rush off to the next thing. And lastly, taking the practice with you. Take it for a walk. Use it while you're in a meeting. Use it before the meeting. And there's no better place to practice than in the real-time moment, in the existing moment. Yeah, so take it with you. Take it wherever you want to go. And adapt your practices as much as you can. You don't have to follow the checklist as someone on Instagram or the Breath app taught you to do it. If you find shorter breaths or a longer walk or a shorter walk does different things for you, change it. Make it yours. There's no right or wrong way to do these practices. As long as you want it to become embodied and for it to stick in some way and have an impact, follow the layers. Sink deep into the soil of the body and hit as many physiological systems in one go. And the practices will stick and you'll get the best benefit from them.
Cool.
Right.
So that takes us to Q&A. Any final questions? I'm also mindful. This is a practice I try to do more often, is to give people the 10-minute transition time. If you want to implement something in your day-to-day, see if you can force a 10 or 5-minute gap at the end of all your meetings. So you give your body actual transition time. It's so important and it's so hard to actually do. But it can be life-changing, those 5 minutes. So I'm not going to force you to stay. I want to give you the 5 minutes if you want to take it. But if anyone has any questions you want to ask, the floor is yours. You can also type in the chat. If you don't have any questions and you want to drop off, then feel free to run. We'll also send you the recording afterwards if you want to, and we'll send you this deck. And you're welcome to reach out to us afterwards. It was lovely to have you here. It's nice for the turnout. Really appreciate the support. It's always better to do these than to broadcast them into the ether.
Yeah. And if you have questions that bubble up afterwards and you watch the recording again, send us a message or the question on LinkedIn or our emails as well. Yeah.
Also, before we go, there's a link in the chat. If you can, I hope it's the right one. For feedback. If you have any feedback on the talk, it's lovely for us to just get some sense of what worked or didn't work, if there's anything we can improve. And we'll see you at the next one.
Yeah, thanks for everyone attending, and thank you for all the love in the chat box.
Cool. Right, everyone, take care.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao. Bye.